With Pokemon Scarlet and Violet coming out this month, I wanted to nerd out a bit and talk about regional forms in Pokemon. Now, these games are coming out very soon, but apparently they have just leaked. But I have not looked at the leaks myself, and I don't really plan to, so I'm not going to be discussing any of that in this video. I'm just going to be focusing on the details that the Pokemon Company has officially released. Back in 2016, when the Pokemon Sun and Moon games were on the way, we were introduced to the concept of regional forms of existing Pokemon. In Pokemon games, we've seen various examples of Pokemon with different forms. Technically, I guess the first example of different forms would be the various Unknowns in Gen 2, but starting in Gen 3 we saw a number of different forms of Pokemon, such as ability forms, legendaries with form changes, Rotom appliance forms, different Burmy types, seasonal forms, anime forms, size forms, Dog Snake Gundam forms, color forms, poodle forms, weather forms, type-changing forms, cool guy forms, forgery forms, hangry forms, eating another Pokemon forms, riding on another Pokemon forms, flavor forms? Okay, so there are plenty of examples of different forms in Pokemon, so what's so special about regional forms? Well, as someone who started by playing Pokemon Yellow on my Extreme Green Game Boy Pocket back in 1998, I've been a huge fan of everything Pokemon for over 20 years. I started with the original 151 Pokemon, and while there are tons of Pokemon I really like out of the current 900 plus, the Gen 1 Pokemon still hold a special place in my heart. Then when Pokemon Sun and Moon were on the way in 2016, we got our first look at regional forms of existing Pokemon in the Alola region. The first Alolan form Pokemon I remember was the Alolan Sandshrew and Sandslash. Sandslash has never been particularly good when it comes to its stats or competitive usage, but it was always one of my favorite designs from Gen 1. The Alolan form may not have turned out to be much more useful, but as soon as I saw the Alolan form, I fell in love with the idea of regional forms for existing Pokemon. I saw it as a creative way to breathe life back into older Pokemon that may have become overshadowed by newer and stronger Pokemon. Some of you may not know this, but some regional forms actually have a slightly different stat spread as well. For example, Cantonian Sandslash has 45 base special attack, which is terrible, and there's pretty much no reason you'd ever want to use special attacks with a Sandslash anyway. Well, Alolan Sandslash's special attack has 20 less base power at 25, but he has 10 more base power in each of his defense stats, making better use of those 20 points. Unfortunately, Alolan Sandslash's Ice-Steel typing makes him 4 times weak to fire and fighting, so in the end this new form didn't exactly propel Sandslash into the top tiers of competitive Pokemon, but some Alolan form Pokemon did actually turn out to be much more viable than their original counterparts, such as Alolan Marowak. Once these Alolan forms were revealed, there were many people across the internet theorizing about what other Pokemon may get regional forms, and imagining what types they would be. Ninetales went from being a fire type to having an ice fairy type, so anything seemed possible. Back then the only thing I didn't like was that there weren't more regional forms. That and... moving on. Once the Gen 8 games, Sword and Shield, were revealed, we got even more regional forms. And this time they expanded on this idea. We got regional forms of existing Pokemon that had completely new evolutions, regional forms that got new evolutions when they previously didn't have a second or third evolution, and regional forms for legendary Pokemon. As far as I'm concerned, this was revolutionary. Reason being is there are plenty of older Pokemon from previous generations that I and other Pokemon fans have felt deserved evolutions for years. Anytime I see a Pokemon that isn't very good and doesn't have any evolutions, I always wonder if they will ever get some sort of evolution. I think that's why I love Gen 4 so much, because those games introduced new evolutions for numerous, let's say, low to mid-tier Pokemon, like Rhydon, Tangela, Yanma, and more. I think Mega Evolutions kinda tried to do this by giving Mega forms to Pokemon like Pinsir, Heracross, and Aerodactyl, but when I first learned about Mega Evolutions, I remember being a bit disappointed that a Pokemon like Pinsir wasn't actually getting a permanent evolution. However, seeing Pokemon like Farfetch'd and Corsola get actual evolutions means there's hope for so many other borderline useless Pokemon. In fact, I think Pokemon Legends Arceus did a really good job with the regional forms that they introduced in the Hisui region as well. Some of the Hisuian form Pokemon that they introduced and their evolutions may actually be some of my favorite regional forms yet. Stantler is a perfect example of a Pokemon that was effectively useless in previous games, and not only did it get a new evolution, but it also feels like they sort of corrected a previous mistake by making Weirdeer normal and Psychic type. I don't know anyone that's ever truly used a Stantler in their playthrough of any Pokemon game, but the one thing I remember about it was how annoying it was in Gold and Silver when it would use Hypnosis right before you get to the Ghost Gym in Ecruteak City. Yet Stantler was only normal type. So when Pokemon Legends Arceus introduced Weirdeer as a normal Psychic type, it just felt right. We also got some much needed evolutions for Pokemon such as Quillfish, aka Quilliam, and new alternate evolutions. Also, I've mostly been focusing on Pokemon that I feel like deserve regional forms because their original forms may not be very good, but I do still find it really cool when there are some pretty powerful or popular Pokemon that get regional forms as well. While I might not think Hisuian Arcanine is very good due to its typing, kind of like Alolan Sandslash, I think his design is still really cool. And Hisuian Zoroark and Braviary have some of the sickest designs out of all of them. It's also worth noting that Legends Arceus was the only game so far to introduce regional forms for starter Pokemon as well, even if it was only for their final evolutions. So now that we've covered regional forms in Alola, Galar, and Hisui, it's finally time to get what prompted me to make this video in the first place, and that is the new Paldea region in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. First, if you're planning on going into the new games completely blind and don't want any spoilers about the new Pokemon that they've revealed, now's your chance to click away. Just do me a favor and click that subscribe button before you do, and leave a like on this video if you've enjoyed it so far. I'd like to make more videos like this covering a variety of topics, and I might make another video regarding the new Pokemon games after they come out as well. Now, the new Pokemon Scarlet and Violet games take place in the Paldea region, which is based on Spain. In the last couple months, we've had a few new Pokemon revealed, including a couple regional forms. Ever since regional forms were introduced in the Alola region, we've had 10 or more regional forms of existing Pokemon show up in each game, and that's not even counting if they had more than one evolution. So far in the Paldea region, we've seen official reveals for 2 Paldean form Pokemon. The first was Paldean Wooper, and the most recent was a new evolution for Girafarig called Farigiraf. However, there's a bit of a unique case this time around as well that I want to talk about, and that is a regional form that isn't even really a regional form at all. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm referring to Wiglet. At first glance, and based on the obviously similar name, Wiglet appears to be just a regional form of Diglett. However, other regional forms have always had the same name as their original counterpart, such as Paldean Wooper. Paldean Wooper is Poison Ground instead of Water Ground, but they don't call him Pooper. They call him Paldean Wooper because he is specifically a regional variant of Wooper. Also, regional forms of existing Pokemon imply that they are different forms of a Pokemon based on where it lives and how it adapted to that environment over a long period of time in a different manner from its other regional forms. That's why you don't typically have both regional forms of one Pokemon in the same region unless they are obtained by trading or some other method. But you're not supposed to be able to just go in the wild and find a Cantonian Exeggutor and an Alolan Exeggutor in the same region because they have adapted to grow very differently in different regions. However, in Paldea, it's been confirmed that you will be able to find both Diglett and Wiglet naturally in the wild, and the information we have on Wiglet so far says that they are completely different species of Pokemon. It appears that they've adapted in some similar ways, such as digging into the ground, but they are not actually the same species. They are just 2 different Pokemon that dig into the ground. So what's the big deal? Why does this matter? Well, to be honest, maybe to you it doesn't matter at all. But to me, someone who loves the idea of new regional forms, it's very exciting. The Alola region introduced our first regional forms, giving new life to Pokemon we've known and loved for years, decades even. The Galar region introduced regional forms that could evolve into completely new Pokemon and regional legendaries. The Hisui region introduced regional forms for starter Pokemon evolutions. I could be wrong, but Wiglet seems to me like the new idea for regional forms, and since it's not technically the same species as Diglett, it could evolve into something significantly more unexpected than other regional forms. With the existing regional forms, there's usually some parallel for the entire evolutionary line, and even with the Pokemon that have new evolutions, such as Meowth evolving into Berserker instead of Persian, or Sneasel evolving into Sneasler instead of Weavile, they still have some level of similarity. But with Wiglet, I think it's very unlikely it's just going to evolve into 3 of itself like some sort of Wug trio. There's a good chance it will evolve into something vastly different from a Dugtrio, or at least I hope so. Also, while we've seen Paldean Wooper, we don't know yet if it's going to evolve into a Paldean Quagsire or something completely new. There's also a possibility that Paldean Quagsire, or whatever the second stage is, could evolve into a 3rd stage Pokemon. Kind of like Galarian Linoon being able to evolve into Obstagoon even though Hoennian Linoon can't evolve. Now, I'm just getting into speculation, but that's honestly something I enjoy when it comes to upcoming Pokemon games ever since the introduction of regional forms. If they maintain the trend of having at least 10 different lines of regional forms, we can expect to see at least 7 or 8 more when the game releases. Seeing as the Paldea region is based on Spain, my money is on a new Tauros, regional form, and or evolution. But some other Pokemon I think deserve some love would be Golduck, Hypno, and Dunsparce, just to name a few. Also, I know the games have leaked, so some of you may already know the answers to the questions I'm posing, but I started working on this video in September when Wiglet was first revealed, and I really wanted to make it anyway. I've been avoiding the leaks myself, so I'm curious to see if any of my predictions are correct, but the games are almost out, so I don't mind waiting a bit longer. Anyway, I think I finally got my regional forms rant off my chest, but I'd love to know what y'all think. Do you like regional forms like I do? Do any of you have any regional forms predictions? What Pokemon would you like to see get a regional form in Paldea or future games? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll catch y'all in the next video. Oh, and real quick, it took me so long to get this video out that the game literally comes out tomorrow, but I will also be streaming pretty much all day when the game comes out, so make sure to tune in for that. If you haven't already, you can hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you hopefully get notified for future videos and streams and all that. But otherwise, just be sure to tune in, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.